Hello. In this video, we are going to be going over the concept of intervals when you play them at the piano keyboard and also when you see them in your music. So right now I am on the 1D portion of the Piano Marble Technique book, and this is page 13 for 1D. So what I want you to look at and focus on is that notice we start with a middle C here, right? And they're telling you the different intervals that you can have when you're looking at music. So one thing to keep in mind is we have different types of intervals. We have intervals that are harmonic or together. That's how you make up chords or harmonies, right? Different intervals make up these, right? We call these harmonic intervals when they're written together. And then we also have intervals that are separate, which are or, right? So we're basically playing different melodies. We're playing separate notes, and they skip around, or they're next to each other. We call those melodic intervals, right? So, to help you read music better and also to train your ear, it helps to recognize these intervals when you hear them and also when you see them. So, just to give you an idea, so if you have your keyboard next to you, you can practice this. So right now they're giving you a middle C, and then we have a second, what that sounds like, a third, a fourth, and a fifth. So, looking at the music is one thing, hearing it and playing it is another thing. So when you look at your music, notice that whenever you have seconds, they're written close together. So meaning they're on a line to a space note. So notice middle C has its own line through it. It goes to a space note. When you have a third, it's a line to the very next line note. When you have a fourth, it's a line. And notice how the space between the notes is a little bit bigger. So that signifies it's bigger than, say, a second or a third. So this time it goes from a line to a space, or a space to a line. When you have a fifth, when you're reading it in staff, you can have a line, skip a line, to the next line. So notice that's what a fifth looks like if it's a harmonic or together, right? And then if we go back down, a fourth, again, is opposite space to line, line to space. A third is line to the very next line. It could also be space to the very next space. And then seconds are close to each other, meaning the written is a line to the next space. Right? And then thirds should be easy to look at when you look at them in the music. They're a line to the very next line. It's also helpful to know when you play a triad or a root position chord on the piano, they're built with thirds. So that's a third. Third on third. Okay? So very basic stuff. So when you see them in music, they look one way. Again, these are called harmonic intervals. And you play them together. And this is what they sound like. So we have a note by itself. Second. Third. Fourth. Fifth. Fourth. Third. Second. And then third. Alright? And then they have this exercise in the left hand. It's the same idea. So again, just listen to how the intervals sound a little bit different from each other. Okay, so that's just to get an idea of what they look like when they're written out as harmonic or harmonies, meaning the intervals are played together. Okay, here's another example. Okay, melodic intervals. So like I said, this is when the intervals are separated, or whenever you hear a melody or a melody line in your music or with a vocalist or instrumentalist. So as you can see, they're written out in quarter notes, but again, when you're looking at intervals and music, you want to look for what's the distance between note to note. Are they close together or are they far apart? Sometimes you can also call these steps or skips. So steps meaning they're close to each other. So basically all seconds would be some sort of step. But then when you have, say, a third or larger, we would call those skips, because you're skipping a key or you're skipping a line or a space. So anything larger than a second, we could call it a skip. But get used to recognizing these as intervals, so seconds, thirds, fourths, or fifths, all the way up to eighths, sixteenths, or eighths, ninths, thirteenths. Or you could recognize them as steps, which are mainly just seconds, or skips. Anything that's a third, fourth, fifth, anything that looks like it's skipping lines and spaces. That's why we call them skips. Okay. Melodic intervals. They go from one note to the next note. So written out, this whole exercise, we have a second here from middle C to D. Then we have a third from middle C to E. A fourth, middle C to F. Fifth, middle C to G. So it sounds like this. Right? And then left hand does the same thing. And also, one thing you can also think about too is that these notes, so say G to F here is a second, they're going down. But then you can also think about the distance between notes from, say, from here where they didn't write anything. So from F to G, what interval would that be? You're going up this time. So if we went down from G to F, going down a second, and then if we played this F again to G, what would that be? So if you think about the answer, it would still be a second, but this time it's going up. Right? It's the same interval, but just in a different direction. Right? So you can have intervals between notes, basically in all places. So even if they didn't label it, yes, this is a second going down, but also going from here to here, this is a second going up. Then when you get to G to E, that's a third going down. Right? So you can have intervals that way. So I'm going to play this whole exercise here, and this is an example of melodic intervals. So meaning they're not played together, but they're played separately or different pitches going in different directions. And then just like we had in the piano marble exercise, this is the same example of what harmonic intervals look like. And again, they have the same thing where they start on seconds, and then they get larger, going to fifths. And again, listen to the sound. And then if you played them separately, so it's not written here, but if I played them separately, it would be something like this. Alright, so the goal for you after watching this video is to know what the intervals, different intervals look like on the page when you see them in music, and also what they sound like. And you can experiment on your own keyboard as well. So moving on, this is in the Alfred book, so this is page 30 in Unit 2. So just by looking at these examples here, you should be able to name what kind of interval these are, whether they're seconds, thirds, fourths, fifths, or so on. And like I said before, one thing that will help you is to know that there's kind of a pattern when you see intervals, even if they're separated. So, for example, any even interval, so say second, fourth, and then they also have sixths and eighths. Notice that they're different notes, meaning they're on a line or a space, right? So seconds, usually a line note to a space note or a space note to a line note. Let's take a fourth, same idea. A line to a space or space to a line. And then so on and so forth for even intervals. If you had an odd interval, so say a third or a fifth or a seventh, notice how they're same type of note, they're line notes. So a third would be line note to the very next line note. Fifth would be a line note, skip a line to the very next line note. Or same thing with spaces, space, skip a space, space. So any odd interval, it would be the same type of line to line or space to space type of notes, how they move, right? So with that information, looking here, you should be able to tell easily, like for example this. It's a space note to another space note. What kind of interval is it? So in your head, just like I said before, if they're an odd interval, they would have the same type of note, kind of space note or a line note. So in this case it's a third, because it's a space to the very next space. And if I played it, it looks like this. And then same thing, if we have same type of note, this is a line note, also to a line note, but we're skipping a line, so it's bigger than, say, a third. But in this case, same type of note, it's going to be an odd interval. This time it's a fifth, because we have a C, we skip a line to the next line. Another way to think of it is you can also count by each individual line space, but I don't recommend it because it takes too long, or it just basically takes you more time to figure it out. So if you learn to visually look at it and recognize it quickly, or quicker, that'll help you when you sight read music. So this is what a fifth looks like. You're skipping a line or a space to the next one. So take a moment, look at this interval here. We have a C to an F. What interval would that be? Notice that it's a space to a line note, so they're not the same. So that means it would be some sort of even interval. And so in this case, the answer would be a fourth. And again, if you were to count up each note, fourth. And this is a melodic interval because they're separated, right? And then here we have a what? It's a second. So again, it takes time, but just look at your music or examples and see if you can point out what kind of interval you have, and see if you can get a little bit faster by looking at it. Okay? And then, when we have repertoire, so this is a tiny little piece. So, let me play a little bit of it, and I want you to think about what kind of intervals are happening with this piece here. I can get it. Okay. So we have So what type of intervals do you think you heard while I played that? And if you look at it, notice you have line, space, line. So basically that means they're all seconds. Same thing here, seconds. From here to here is a bit of a jump. It would be a fourth. Right? So just get used to looking at different intervals and what they sound like. And really quickly, this one, seconds as well, so on and so forth. And that is our lesson on intervals.